So the first book which I read this month was Neil Gaiman's The Graveyard Book. Now this book I absolutely loved. I gave it 5 stars. It basically is the telling of, follows the life of a boy called Bod, or yeah, Nobody, and he lives in a graveyard with like dead stuff. That's it, to summarise. But the thing that I loved about it is that the opening to the book is absolutely incredible. There's so much suspense and it's so dark and creepy. There are children in my class or children that I've taught that I know are going to absolutely love this book. They're so well written, the opening. It got me hooked right from the start. I since found out that it's actually like a retelling or loosely inspired by The Jungle Book, which, you know, makes the title make sense and everything. I didn't make the connection myself, but I thought that was quite interesting. But it's just a bunch of kind of short adventures and they're really well told. Really happy with it. It's a great book. Love Neil Gaiman. The second book which I read as part of the summer reading challenge was Hatchet by Gary Paulsen, which is actually like 2 books in one, which I hadn't realised when I started reading it. But it basically tells the story of a boy who, you know, gets lost in the wilderness. I think the plane crashes that he's travelling on and he has to survive there on his own. I really enjoyed it because I think I loved that survival element and I loved hearing about, you know, how he was going to survive, how he's going to make a fire, how was he going to eat, how was he going to protect himself. That is something that I've always been interested in, particularly as a child. So I enjoyed that. What I didn't enjoy so much was the second story. Because the second book is even more ridiculous. Like, the reason that he ends up in that situation is so far-fetched and unbelievable that just annoyed me. And then it felt like it cut really short. It felt like the first book was fab and should have just stopped there, but the author obviously wanted to continue with the character, but I wish that they hadn't because it's a great book. But blah. Then after that, I read The Night I Met Father Christmas by Ben Miller. Now, this book is beautiful looking. It really, really is. And it has lots of pictures on each page and it is a beautiful book. It's basically a story of a boy who meets Father Christmas one day and Father Christmas is telling him the story about how Christmas came to be. That kind of thing. It's nice enough, but it did fall a bit flat for me. The biggest thing this book has going for it is how pretty it is, because I wasn't aware, and I read online afterwards that it was, you know, it's got some connections with, or it's inspired loosely by A Christmas Carol. Inspired loosely is pretty much stolen from A Christmas Carol. Now I've checked all over, and it doesn't seem that that's disclosed, for want of a better word. So it felt like a complete rip-off of A Christmas Carol, basically. It's cute enough. I think if I'd read it around Christmas time it would have been cuter, but it just didn't cut it for me. So this month I read A Faraway Magic by Amy Wilson. It basically follows the story of a young teenage girl called Angel, and she has basically moved to a new place because obviously tragic circumstances, and she meets a boy called Bavar at school. She feels strangely drawn to him because why wouldn't you? And then finds out that actually he is quite creepy and has a dark demon fighting story of his own to tell. On the face of it, I should have hated this book. I mean, it's fantasy, it's got monsters, it's got a boy-girl almost romance going on, and they're, you know, all the things that I realistically don't particularly like in a book. But I absolutely loved it. Like, I couldn't really tell you why. It was something, I suppose, in the storytelling. It was very, very wistful, very magical, very all of those things. And that was really beautiful to read. And I really, really enjoyed it. I gave it, I think, 5 stars, but it might have been 4. But the long and the short of it is that I absolutely loved it. So the next book which I read this month was Nevermore by Linda Newbery. This was also part of the summer reading challenge that I was doing to read 6 children's books. It follows the character Tizzy, who is, it's very middle grade so she is that kind of secondary school, young secondary school age. Anyway, her mum moves around a lot and they move to this place called Nevermore, which is a creepy house, and her mum is the cook there, and she's sort of exploring and getting to know it, getting to know the characters, and there's definitely some big mystery going on. And for a sort of middle grade mystery, it's absolutely fantastic. I thought that it created suspense really well. There was something quite magical and dark about it. I think the notion of that kind of old creepy house, Victorian era, was very cool. Some of the characters are quite dark, but it did feel a bit like, when it all came together at the end, it was a bit like, oh, this is too much for me. It just felt so unrealistic that I didn't enjoy that. But I mean, it was an enjoyable read. I never had any difficulties convincing myself to read it. It just, I think is a great first mystery novel for those at sort of middle grade age. So the next book which I read this month was Artemis Fowl and the Atlantis Complex. I mean, it's following the Artemis Fowl read-along, which I've been doing all year, and there's only one book to go, which is very exciting, I think. No, I think there's only one book to go, not I think it's very exciting. But anyway, in this book, Artemis Fowl gets the Atlantis Complex, which basically is a mental health problem, and he starts going all bonkers and having some OCD and multiple personality disorder side effects. I don't have a lot to say about this. I felt it was good. It was very Artemis Fowl, but there was nothing exceptional. There's nothing particularly to say, like I say. I am looking forward to completing the series. It's been quite exciting. I must admit that I never imagined in a million years that I would stick with the read-along this far. I think I'm slightly behind. I think they might have actually finished and I've got one book to go. But at the start of the year, I just went, yeah, I'll join in, and never really imagined getting this far. So I'm very excited about that. Well done, Artemis Fowl.
Well done, Mummy.
Well done, Mummy. And then I read Day of the Accident by Nuala Ellwood, I don't know. This follows main character Maggie. I think most of these have female characters, main characters, which is interesting. But anyway, it follows her. Basically, she is waking up in hospital following having been in an accident in which her daughter died. Great mystery ensues because she doesn't remember the accident. She doesn't really know what happened. And it's basically a thriller mystery thing that's allowing you to piece together clues and figure out what on earth went on that has caused her life to be turned upside down in this way. I really enjoyed the mystery element of it. I thought it was very, you know, standard, cliche, etc, etc, except at the end where it just went absolutely bonkers mental. It felt like the author had a really good idea of how to write a mystery and how to create suspense, but not really a good idea of how to tie things up in a realistic and logical way. So it just felt that all the characters just fell out of themselves. That's not a very good expression, but all the characters in the end were just there to wrap up the story rather than to be the characters who they had been through the rest of the book, and it just felt a bit bonkers. But it was good. I mean, I'm not sad that I read it. I enjoyed it.